I never imagined I'd find myself on my own daughter's porch pleading for shelter at 64 with nothing but ash-stained clothing and a worn duffel bag. I raised a trembling hand to knock on Rebecca's pristine door. The wildfire had consumed everything. 41 years of memories turned to cinders in mere hours. My farmhouse, the stables where I'd raised award-winning horses, the cherry orchard my late husband David had lovingly planted, all erased. The insurance agent warned me processing would take months, maybe longer. The payout might not even cover reconstruction. I had nowhere to turn. Rebecca answered, wearing a silk top that likely cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her carefully shaped eyebrows lifted as she surveyed my soot-covered jeans and meager belongings. "Mother, what brings you here?" The tone carried unmistakable annoyance. "The farm's gone, honey. Everything burned. I was hoping to stay with you and Marcus for a few days while I sort things out." My voice wavered, despite my effort to sound composed. Before Rebecca could respond, Marcus materialized behind her. My son-in-law had always obsessed over appearances, but the disgust on his face was something I'd never witnessed. "Absolutely not," he declared, positioning himself protectively before his wife. "Look at you. You're filthy. You'll destroy my Persian carpet. That piece cost $18,000. Humiliation burned my cheeks. "I could shower first, Marcus. I just need what you need is to handle your own problems." He cut me off, his voice icy. "We've established a certain standard here. Evelyn, image is everything. I can't have a vagrant sleeping on my furniture when my clients might visit." Vagrant. The word struck like a slap. To him, that's all I was now, not his mother-in-law, not the woman who'd raised the daughter he professed to love, just unwanted baggage. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. My own daughter, the child I'd nursed through scarlet fever at 7, who I'd worked double shifts to send to university, stood mute while her husband labeled me a vagrant. "Please," I whispered, despising my desperate tone. "I raised you, Rebecca. I gave up everything for you. Doesn't that count for something?" For a heartbeat, I detected something in her expression. Guilt, perhaps, regret. But Marcus's hand landed possessively on her shoulder, and whatever compassion existed vanished instantly. "Mother, you must understand our situation," Rebecca said, her words carefully measured. "Marcus is correct about appearances. Perhaps you could contact Aunt Patricia in Seattle." My sister in Seattle hadn't spoken to me in 9 years following our argument about David's funeral. Rebecca knew this perfectly well, yet suggested it anyway. "I understand," I managed, my throat constricting. "Perfectly clear." Marcus was already closing the door. "I'm confident you'll manage, Evelyn. You always were resourceful." The door clicked shut with finality, but what Marcus and Rebecca didn't know was that I had one more number to call, someone from my past who would change everything. Stay with me to discover what happened next. I stood on that immaculate porch for several minutes, shock and disbelief battling with a pain so profound it felt suffocating. This was my daughter, my only child, the little girl who'd crawled into my bed during storms, who'd sobbed when I worked late shifts at the restaurant. Where had that child gone? My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Mother, I apologize, but Marcus is right. Perhaps this is the wake-up call you need to plan your future more responsibly. There are senior communities that might assist." Senior communities. Code for anywhere except here. I trudged back to my old pickup truck, the sole possession that survived because I'd driven it into town when the fire erupted. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys. Where could I go? The closest motel was 30 miles away, and my checking account held exactly $223. Sitting in that truck, the complete weight of my situation crashed down. I was 64, homeless, and apparently unwanted by my own family. The farm that had defined my identity, my livelihood, my legacy, gone. The daughter I devoted my life to raising, lost to greed and status seeking. But as I stared at their perfect house with its perfect lawn and perfect pretense, something shifted inside me. The crushing despair began transforming into something else, something harder, something that had been building for years as I watched Rebecca become someone I barely recognized. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in 17 years. My finger hovered over the number, heart racing. Would he even remember me? Would he care? There was only one way to find out, but as I stared at that name on my screen, I realized my daughter had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had no idea who she'd just turned away. None of them did. And when they discovered what I'd been keeping from them all these years, their perfect little world would shatter. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Rebecca had just struck the match. Sitting in that parking area outside Rebecca's house, I couldn't stop memories from flooding back. Each one felt like a knife twist, reminding me of everything I'd sacrificed for the daughter who just slammed the door in my face. I remembered when David died. Rebecca was only 11, crying so violently at the funeral that she became ill. I held her through the night in that narrow hospital bed while she vomited from grief, promising her everything would be all right, though I had no idea how I'd keep that promise. David's life insurance barely covered funeral expenses. The farm was drowning in debt, and I had a sixth-grade daughter who needed stability more than ever, so I did what any mother would do. I worked 3 jobs: breakfast shift at Murphy's restaurant, afternoon cleaning houses for wealthy families on the hillside, and night shifts at the textile mill when available. Rebecca never knew about the nights I cried myself to sleep, exhausted and aching, wondering if I was strong enough to hold everything together. But there was another child in my life during those years, a boy whose story was intertwined with ours in ways Rebecca never fully understood. Keep watching to discover the shocking truth. Rebecca never knew about my peanut butter sandwich dinners, so there'd be money for her school clothes. She was just a child. She shouldn't have had to know. But what shattered my heart most was how she started looking at me during those years like I was an embarrassment. Like my calloused hands and exhausted eyes somehow made me inferior to other mothers who drove luxury cars and didn't smell like restaurant grease. When she turned 15, she stopped bringing friends home. "It's just easier to hang out at their houses, Mom," she'd say. What she meant was their houses were nicer, their mothers more polished. I wasn't the kind of mother she wanted her friends to see. I should have been angry. Instead, I worked harder. I wanted to give her everything those other children had. I sacrificed my own dreams, my own future, telling myself it would all be worthwhile when she succeeded. The irony wasn't lost on me now. All those years trying to make Rebecca's life perfect, and she'd grown up to become exactly like the people who'd looked down on us. But there was another child in those memories, a boy whose story was woven into ours in ways Rebecca never fully grasped. Michael Chen lived in the dilapidated house beside our farm. His parents were the town alcoholics. Everyone knew it, but nobody discussed it openly. When Michael was 7 years old, he started appearing at our kitchen door during meal times, always with some excuse. My mom wanted to know if you had any flour. Can I see your chickens? My dad says, do you need help with anything? The truth was written across his thin frame and hollow eyes. The boy was starving, and not just for food. He was desperate for kindness, for someone to notice him, for a place where raised voices didn't mean someone was about to get hurt. David recognized it before I did. That boy needs looking after, he said one evening as we watched 7-year-old Michael through our kitchen window, sitting alone on his front steps. His folks aren't capable. After David died, Michael became my shadow. He'd appear every morning before school helping with farm chores without being asked. When I returned home from my shifts, barely able to stand, he'd already fed the horses and collected the eggs. You don't have to do that, sweetheart, I told him one afternoon when I found him mucking out stalls that were my responsibility. I like helping, he said simply. Besides, you take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you too. That's when I knew this boy possessed an old soul. He was only 8, but he understood something about love and loyalty that many adults never learn. He understood that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. Michael never complained when his father came home drunk and violent. But what happened next would change both our lives forever. Don't go anywhere. Michael never asked me to call social services, though heaven knows I should have. Instead, he'd simply appear at my door with his homework, and I'd let him complete it at my kitchen table while I cooked dinner on the worst nights when the shouting from next door grew too loud. I'd find him sleeping in our barn come morning. Rebecca tolerated him because I insisted, but she never truly accepted him. Why does he always have to be here? She'd complain when Michael joined us for Sunday dinners or family movie nights. Because he needs us, I'd tell her. Sometimes we're the family people choose, not just the one they're born into. She'd roll her eyes and retreat to her room, even at 11, 12, 13. Rebecca had already decided that Michael Chen was beneath her notice. He was poor, his clothes were secondhand, and his parents were the kind of people respectable families whispered about. But I saw something in that boy, a fierce intelligence that school couldn't quite nurture, a determination that reminded me of my younger self. When he was 14, he taught himself computer programming from library books. When he was 15, he was repairing neighbors' computers for spending money. When he was 16, he was already talking about college, about escaping our small town and making something of himself. The last real conversation I'd had with Michael was the night before he left for college. He'd earned a full scholarship to Stanford, something that still amazed our small town high school counselor. We sat on my front porch, sharing a thermos of coffee and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and violet. I wouldn't have made it without you, Miss Evelyn, he said quietly. You know that, right? I squeezed his hand. You would have found a way, Michael. You're stronger than you realize. Maybe. But you gave me something I never had before. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You gave me a family, a real one. That was 17 years ago. Michael Chen had kept in touch for the first few years of college, sending me holiday cards and occasional letters about his studies. Then life took over the way it does, and the contact grew sporadic. Last I'd heard through town gossip, he'd graduated from Stanford and moved to Silicon Valley. Someone mentioned he'd started his own company, but I'd never paid much attention to rumors. Now, sitting in my truck outside Rebecca's perfect house, I stared at his name in my phone contacts. Michael Chen, the scared little boy who used to help me feed horses, had become a man I barely knew. Would he even remember the woman who'd made him peanut butter sandwiches and helped him with homework? More importantly, would he care that she needed help now? My finger hovered over his number as another painful realization hit me. I had raised two children in that farmhouse. One was my biological daughter, who'd just proven that blood meant nothing to her when it came to inconvenience. The other was a boy I'd chosen to love, who'd chosen to love me back. What happened when I made that call would shock everyone, including myself. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. 17 years. It had been 17 years since I'd heard Michael's voice, and here I was about to call him at my lowest moment, completely desperate. What if he'd forgotten me? What if he was busy, successful, surrounded by important people who wouldn't understand why some old farm woman was interrupting his evening? But what choice did I have? I was 64, homeless, and apparently worthless to my own daughter. The truck was getting cold, and I needed to make a decision before the local motel filled up for the night. I pressed the call button before I could lose my nerve. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My heart sank with each ring. Of course he wouldn't answer. Why would a successful businessman take calls from unknown numbers at 8:45 on a Friday evening? I was about to hang up when I heard his voice. Hello? It was deeper now, mature, but there was something in the tone that made my throat close up with recognition. This was still Michael, my Michael, even after all these years. Michael, my voice came out barely above a whisper. This is Evelyn. Evelyn Morrison from Miss Evelyn. The change in his voice was instant, electric. Oh my God, are you okay? Is everything all right? He remembered. Not only did he remember, but the first thing he asked was if I was okay. Tears started flowing before I could stop them. I'm sorry for calling you out of the blue like this. I know it's been so long and you probably have a family now, responsibilities. Stop, he said firmly but gently. Don't you dare apologize. You can call me anytime, anywhere, for anything. You know that. Now tell me what's wrong. So I did. I told him about the wildfire, about losing the farm, about standing on Rebecca's doorstep only to be turned away like a beggar. I told him about Marcus calling me a vagrant, about Rebecca's silence, about having nowhere to go. The words poured out like water through a broken dam, 17 years of distance collapsing in the span of a single phone call. Michael listened without interrupting, making small sounds of sympathy and growing anger. When I finished, there was a long pause that made my stomach clench with fear. Had I burdened him too much? Had I presumed too much on a relationship that existed decades ago? Miss Evelyn, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, that woman is not the little girl you raised. What Rebecca did tonight is unforgivable. The fierce protectiveness in his voice reminded me of the teenage boy who used to get angry when kids at school said cruel things about my secondhand clothes or my multiple jobs. Even then, Michael had defended me more fiercely than my own daughter ever had. She's still my daughter, I said weakly, though the words felt hollow. No, Michael said with quiet certainty. A daughter doesn't abandon her mother. A daughter doesn't call the woman who sacrificed everything for her a vagrant. You know what you are to me, Miss Evelyn? You're the only mother I ever really had. And no mother of mine is going to spend tonight in a shelter or a car. What Michael said next would leave me speechless and change my life in ways I never imagined possible. My breath caught. Michael, I wasn't calling to ask for money, or I know you weren't. That's exactly why I'm going to help you. Where are you right now? I looked around the parking area, still within sight of Rebecca's house. I'm still in Ridgemont, in my truck outside Rebecca's house, actually. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you're in shock, which is completely understandable. Are you safe to drive? I think so. Good. There's a Marriott about 15 miles north on Highway 9. Do you know it? I did. It was the elegant hotel where Rebecca and Marcus had held their wedding reception 5 years ago. Yes, but Michael, I can't afford. You're not paying for anything. I'm going to call them right now and book you a suite. Get yourself there, order room service, take a hot bath, and try to get some sleep. Can you do that for me? A suite at the Marriott. I couldn't even imagine what that would cost. But Michael was talking like money was no object. Michael, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You took care of me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to take care of you. His voice softened. Besides, you're going to need to be well rested for tomorrow. Tomorrow? I'm flying out first thing in the morning. I'll be there by noon. Flying out? My mind struggled to process this. Where are you flying from? San Francisco. Don't worry about the details, Miss Evelyn. Just focus on getting somewhere safe tonight. I'll handle everything else. San Francisco was 3,000 miles away. The idea that Michael would drop everything and fly across the country just because I called seemed impossible. You don't have to come all this way. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. Miss Evelyn. His voice was gentle but firm. Do you remember what you told me the night before I left for college? I thought back to that evening on my front porch, the thermos of coffee, the sunset. I remember we talked about a lot of things. You told me that family takes care of family no matter what. You said that when someone you love is hurting, you don't hesitate. You don't make excuses. You just show up. The words came back to me. Then I'd been trying to prepare him for the world beyond our small town, trying to teach him about loyalty and love in a way his own parents never had. I remember, I whispered. Well, I'm showing up. And Miss Evelyn, there's something else you need to know, something about what I've been doing with my life since I left Ridgemont. My heart started beating faster. There was something in his voice, a weight that suggested this conversation was about to take another turn. What is it, sweetheart? The company I started after Stanford, it's done pretty well for itself. Actually, it's done better than well. Miss Evelyn, I'm not just comfortable, I'm wealthy, very wealthy. The word hung in the air between us. Wealthy, the boy who used to wear my late husband's hand-me-down shirts because his own clothes had holes in them, was wealthy. How wealthy? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. His answer would leave me absolutely speechless. Yet Forbes listed my net worth at 3.2 billion last year. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. Billion, not million, billion. Michael Chen, the skinny kid who used to help me collect eggs, was a billionaire. I know it's a lot to process, he continued, but here's what matters. Every success I've ever had, every dollar I've ever earned, every achievement that's brought me to this point, it all started in your kitchen, Miss Evelyn. You gave me the foundation that made everything else possible. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the scared little boy in my memories with the man on the phone who was casually discussing billions of dollars. Tomorrow, when I get to Ridgemont, we're going to have a conversation with your daughter and her husband. They're going to learn exactly who they turned away tonight. But more importantly, you're never going to worry about having a roof over your head again. I'm going to take care of you the way you took care of me. Michael, I don't need billions of dollars. I know you don't. That's one of the reasons you deserve them. His voice grew warmer, more tender. Miss Evelyn, for 17 years, I've been trying to figure out how to repay you for saving my life tomorrow. I finally get the chance. As I hung up the phone and started the truck to drive to the Marriott, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Rebecca had just refused shelter to a woman who'd raised a billionaire who still called her his real mother. My daughter had no idea what was coming for her, but she was about to find out that some mistakes can't be undone. And some bridges, once burned, take everything else down with them. The boy I'd chosen to love was coming home, and he was bringing enough power to change all our lives forever. I woke up in the most luxurious hotel room I'd ever seen. Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, a view of the mountains that took my breath away. For a moment, I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. The fire, Rebecca's rejection, Michael's phone call. Even in the morning light, it seemed impossible. The scared little boy from next door was now worth billions, and he was flying across the country to help me. I checked my phone. 9:53 in the morning. He'd said he'd be here by noon. I'd barely finished my complimentary breakfast when my phone rang. Miss Evelyn, I just landed at the regional airport. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Landed, not my plane landed or the flight arrived, just I landed, like he owned the aircraft, which I was beginning to realize he probably did. Should I meet you in the lobby? Actually, I was thinking we might pay a visit to your daughter and her husband first. If you're up for it. My stomach clenched. Michael, I don't want any trouble. There won't be trouble. I just think it's time they understood who they turned away last night. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just let me do the talking. 24 minutes later, I heard a sound that made everyone in the hotel lobby look up. It was the unmistakable thump of helicopter blades growing louder by the second. What happened next would become the talk of the town for years to come. I walked outside just in time to see a sleek black helicopter settling onto the hotel's front lawn. The hotel staff rushed around frantically, probably trying to figure out if this was legal, while guests pressed against windows to get a better look. The helicopter door opened, and Michael Chen stepped out. I barely recognized him. The skinny boy with second-hand clothes had been replaced by a man in an impeccably tailored suit, moving with the quiet confidence that comes from having enough power to reshape the world around you. But when he saw me, his entire face transformed into the warm smile I remembered from 17 years ago. Miss Evelyn. He walked straight to me and wrapped me in the kind of hug that made me feel like everything was going to be okay. He was taller than I remembered, broader, but his arms still felt like safety. Look at you, I whispered, pulling back to study his face. You're all grown up. Thanks to you. His eyes were serious now. Are you ready for this? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was ready for anything anymore. The helicopter ride to Rebecca's neighborhood took less than 5 minutes. Michael had called ahead to get permission to land on the municipal park across from her house, though I suspected someone with his resources didn't really need to ask permission for much. As we descended, I could see people coming out of their houses, pointing at the helicopter. This was Ridgemont's exclusive Oakwood Estates, where the biggest excitement was usually someone getting a new Mercedes. A private helicopter landing in their neighborhood was definitely not normal. I spotted Rebecca's house, then Rebecca herself standing in her front yard with Marcus beside her. They were staring at the helicopter with the same bewildered expression as their neighbors. Michael helped me down from the aircraft, his hands steady and reassuring on my arm. "Remember," he said quietly as we walked across the park toward the street, "you don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them anything." By the time we reached Rebecca's driveway, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered at what they probably thought was a respectful distance. Marcus was trying to look stern and authoritative, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Rebecca just looked confused. "Mother!" she called out as we approached. "What's going on? Whose helicopter is that?" Michael stepped slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that reminded me of the teenage boy who used to walk me to my car after late shifts at the restaurant. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "I believe you met my mother last night." Rebecca's mouth opened slightly. "Your mother? I don't understand." "Evelyn Morrison, the woman you turned away from your door, the woman your husband called a vagrant." Michael's voice was perfectly controlled, but I could hear the steel underneath. Marcus stepped forward, clearly trying to reassert some authority. "Now wait just a minute. I don't know who you are or why you think you can—" "Michael Chen," Michael interrupted, extending his hand in a gesture that looked polite, but somehow made Marcus step backward. The look on Marcus's face when he realized who Michael was would be something I'd never forget. "You might know me better as the kid who used to live next door to Evelyn when I was a child," Michael continued. "I used to help her feed the horses." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as recognition dawned. Even in our small town, Michael's success story had become legendary. The poor kid who'd made it to Stanford, who'd built a tech empire, who'd been featured on the cover of Business Weekly just 8 months ago. "You're that Michael Chen?" Rebecca whispered, her eyes darting between Michael and me. "The billionaire? I prefer to think of myself as Evelyn Morrison's son," Michael said simply. "The son who's going to make sure she never has to ask anyone for help again." The neighbors were getting closer now, drawn by the obvious tension and the increasingly surreal nature of the conversation happening in broad daylight on Ridgemont's most prestigious street. Marcus, to his credit, tried to rally. "Look, Mr. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter." "You're absolutely right," Michael agreed. "It is a family matter. That's why I'm here." He turned to look directly at Rebecca. "Your mother raised me from the time I was 7 years old. She fed me when my own parents wouldn't, helped me with homework when they were too drunk to care, and made sure I had clean clothes for school. She worked 3 jobs to keep food on her table, and she always made room for one more." Rebecca's face was getting redder by the minute. "She never told me you two were still in touch." "We weren't," Michael said. "Last night was the first time we'd spoken in 17 years. She called me because she had nowhere else to go. Because the daughter she raised, the daughter she sacrificed everything for, slammed the door in her face when she needed help most." "We have our own family to think about," Marcus started. "Family?" Michael repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Let me tell you about family, Mr. Thompson. Family doesn't abandon each other, family doesn't call each other vagrants, and family sure as hell doesn't worry more about a Persian carpet than the woman who gave up her own dreams so her daughter could have everything. The small crowd of neighbors was close enough now to hear every word I could see, phones being pulled out, probably to record this confrontation that would be gossip gold for months to come. Michael, please, I said softly, placing a hand on his arm. This is enough. He looked down at me, his expression softening immediately. No, Miss Evelyn, it's not nearly enough, but it's a start. He turned back to Rebecca and Marcus. I want you both to understand something. Evelyn Morrison is the most important person in my life. She always has been, and she always will be from this day forward. Anything she needs, anything she wants, she gets. No questions asked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is the deed to a house about an hour from here. 6 bedrooms, 8 acres, full-time staff. If she wants it, it's hers, free and clear. Rebecca's eyes widened as she stared at the envelope. 6 bedrooms. But Michael wasn't finished. What he said next would make Rebecca realize the magnitude of her mistake. I also established a trust fund in her name this morning, Michael continued, his voice matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather instead of an amount of money that would change someone's life forever. $28 million. She'll never have to worry about money again. 28 million. I felt dizzy. The farmhouse that had burned down was worth maybe 250,000, and that included the land Marcus looked like he might be sick. 28 million. That's just the start, Michael continued, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. Miss Evelyn doesn't just get a house and money. She gets everything I have, every resource, every connection, every door that my success can open. She gets a family who actually appreciates what she's done. She already has a family, Rebecca said weakly. Michael shook his head. No, she had a daughter who taught her last night that sometimes the family you choose is more loyal than the family you're born into. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the neighbors had stopped murmuring, sensing that they were witnessing something that would define relationships for years to come. Finally, Michael turned back to me. Miss Evelyn, there's a car waiting to take you to your new home. The staff is expecting you, and I've arranged for someone to take you shopping for anything you need. Would you like to go see it? I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. As we turned to walk back toward the helicopter, Rebecca's voice stopped us. Mother, wait. Can we talk? I turned around slowly. My daughter looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what she'd just learned. What would you like to talk about, sweetheart? I made a mistake last night. I should have. Marcus and I were just. She stumbled over the words, clearly struggling to find a way to undo what couldn't be undone. Michael stepped forward again, his voice gentle but final. Mrs. Thompson, mistakes are when you forget to return a phone call or show up late to dinner. What you did last night wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And choices have consequences. But she's my mother, and she was your mother last night when you turned her away. She was your mother when your husband called her a vagrant. She was your mother when she stood on your doorstep with nothing but the clothes on her back, and you chose an $18,000 carpet over her. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Michael, please, I know I was wrong. Can't you give me a chance to make this right? That's not my decision to make, Michael said, glancing at me. It's hers. All eyes turned to me. Rebecca, Marcus, the neighbors, Michael, everyone waiting to see what I would say. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during storms, but the woman who'd made a calculated decision to protect her lifestyle at my expense. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "last night you made your choice clear. You chose your husband, your house, your reputation over your mother. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that choice was wrong for you, but it was definitive, and now I'm making my choice. My next words would change our relationship forever." "Are you happy here?" he asked during one of those visits, studying my face carefully. I looked out over the manicured gardens, the small pond with its fountain, the life of ease and comfort that had replaced my burned down farmhouse. "It's beautiful, Michael. More beautiful than anything I ever dreamed of." "That's not what I asked." I smiled at his persistence. Even as a child, he'd had a way of seeing through polite answers to the truth underneath. "I'm adjusting. It's a lot to get used to." "We can get you a different house if you prefer. Smaller, maybe, closer to town." "No, sweetheart, this is perfect. I'm just not used to having people take care of me instead of the other way around." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "You spent 40 some years taking care of everyone else. It's your turn now." That same evening, as I was settling in with a book in what the staff called the library, an actual library with floor to ceiling bookshelves and a rolling ladder, Rosa knocked on the door. "Mrs. Morrison, your daughter is here. She says she needs to speak with you urgently." My stomach clenched. I'd been expecting this, but that didn't make it any easier. "Show her in, please." Rebecca appeared in the doorway a moment later, her eyes wide as she took in the elegant room. She'd clearly dressed carefully for this visit, her best dress, her most expensive jewelry, her hair styled in the way she thought made her look most appealing. "Mother." She stood there uncertainly, like she wasn't sure whether she was allowed to enter fully. "Come in, sweetheart. Sit down." She perched on the edge of a leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she cleared her throat. "This place is incredible. It is. I had no idea Michael Chen had done so well for himself. I mean, I knew he was successful, but this level of wealth," she gestured around the room, "he's done very well." Another silence. I could see her struggling with how to approach whatever she'd come to say. Finally, the words burst out of her. "Mother, I made a terrible mistake the other night. Marcus and I both did. We were shocked, unprepared, and we reacted badly. But you have to understand, we never meant to hurt you." I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse and seeing mostly panic. "What did you mean to do then?" "We just thought, I mean, you're so independent, so capable. We figured you'd work something out on your own. We didn't realize how serious the situation was." "I told you I'd lost everything in the fire, Rebecca. How much more serious did it need to be?" Her cheeks flushed. "You're right. You're absolutely right. But, Mother, we can fix this. Marcus and I have been talking, and we want to make things right between us." What Rebecca said next would reveal her true motivations and break my heart all over again. "We want you to come home," Rebecca continued. "Home to our house. We've prepared the guest room for you. It's all ready. New sheets, fresh flowers, everything you need. You could move in this weekend if you want." I felt a sad smile tugging at my lips. "And Michael's house, Michael's money, his trust fund, what happens to all of that?" Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate and calculating underneath. "Well, I mean, you don't really need all this, do you? This house is so big, so impersonal. Wouldn't you rather be with family?" There it was. the real reason for her visit. She wanted me to give up the life Michael had provided and come live in their guest room, where they could be close to me and to the $28 million trust fund. I see. I stood up slowly. And what does Marcus think about having his vagrant mother in law move in permanently? He feels terrible about what he said. He wants to apologize personally. How generous of him. Rebecca stood too, moving closer to me. Mother, please. I know we hurt you, but we're family. We're your real family. This Michael Chen. I mean, yes, you helped him when he was a child, but that was a long time ago. He's just feeling guilty because he never stayed in touch. Once that guilt wears off, where will you be? The words hit their target, awakening fears I'd been trying to suppress. What if she was right? What if Michael's generosity was just temporary guilt, and once it faded, I'd be alone again? But then I remembered his face when he stepped off that helicopter, the fierce protectiveness in his voice when he confronted Marcus, the way he still called me his mother. You're worried he'll abandon me the way you did? Rebecca flinched. That's not fair. We didn't abandon you. You slammed the door in my face, Rebecca. Your husband called me a vagrant and said I'd ruin his Persian carpet. How is that not abandonment? We were protecting our home, our lifestyle, from your own mother. The words hung in the air between us. Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. Fine. Yes, we were protecting ourselves. From you, from your problems, your neediness, your constant reminders of everything we've worked so hard to rise above. The ugly truth poured out of her like poison. Do you think it's easy being your daughter? Do you think I enjoyed growing up poor, watching you work yourself to death, being embarrassed by our secondhand everything while my friends had nice things? I absorbed each word like a physical blow. I did my best, Rebecca. I gave you everything I could. I know you did. Tears were streaming down her face now. And I'm grateful. I really am. But I spent my whole childhood promising myself I'd never live like that again. I'd never be poor, never be looked down on, never have to worry about money. Marcus gave me that security, and you threatened it. Yes. No. I don't know. She sank back into the chair, her perfect facade completely demolished. I just know that when I saw you standing there with your soot-covered clothes and your desperate eyes, you looked like everything I'd run away from, and I panicked. The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. For the first time since she'd arrived, I felt like I was talking to my real daughter instead of a carefully crafted performance. What I told Rebecca next would define our relationship for years to come. And now? I asked gently. Now what do you feel? Now I realize I might have thrown away the most important relationship in my life for the sake of a Persian carpet and social appearances. Her voice was small, defeated. I want to fix this, Mother. I need to fix this. I sat back down across from her. What you need and what you want might be two different things, sweetheart. What do you mean? You want to fix this because you've seen what I mean to Michael and you've realized there might be benefits to having me in your life. But do you actually want me, Rebecca? Do you want your mother with all my flaws and limitations and embarrassing history? Or do you want access to what my relationship with Michael might provide? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of a lifetime of complicated emotions. I don't know how to answer that, she finally admitted. At least that's honest. What I do know, she continued, is that I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was ashamed of our circumstances, and I know that losing you would destroy me. I reached over and took her hand. You haven't lost me, sweetheart, but the relationship we had before, the one where I gave and gave while you took it for granted, that relationship is gone. It burned up with my farmhouse. Then what's left? I don't know yet. Maybe nothing, maybe something better than what we had before, but that's up to you to decide. She squeezed my hand. How do I decide? You start by going home to Marcus and thinking about what kind of daughter you want to be going forward. Not what kind of daughter you think I want or what kind will get you the most benefit, but what kind feels right to you as a person. And you? What will you be doing while I'm figuring that out? I looked around the beautiful library, thought about Michael's upcoming visit, about the peaceful life I was building in this place where I was valued simply for being myself. I'll be living my life, Rebecca. For the first time in decades, I'll be living just for me. After she left, I sat alone in the library for a long time, processing everything she'd said. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. At least now I knew where I stood with my daughter. At least now I could stop hoping for something that had never really existed. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael. Hope you're having a good evening. Diana mentioned she's making your favorite pot roast tomorrow. Can't wait to join you for dinner. I smiled, feeling the knot in my chest loosen slightly. Some family is chosen, not born. And sometimes the family that chooses you loves you better than the family that shares your blood. Ever could Rebecca would have to decide what kind of daughter she wanted to be, but I already knew what kind of son Michael was. The kind who flew 3,000 miles to rescue the woman who'd rescued him first, but the story was far from over. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca's number, her seventh attempt to reach me this week. I let it go to voicemail. It wasn't that I was angry with her anymore. Anger required too much energy, and I'd found better uses for mine. I was learning to paint watercolors with an instructor Michael had found for me. I was volunteering at the regional animal shelter, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I was taking a literature class at the community college, reading books I'd always meant to get to during those 40 years of working 3 jobs and raising an ungrateful child. Most importantly, I was learning what it felt like to be someone's priority instead of someone's obligation. Michael visited every week, sometimes twice a week when his schedule allowed. He'd bring his laptop and work from my kitchen table while I cooked, just like when he was a teenager. Sometimes he brought colleagues to introduce to me, brilliant, accomplished people who treated me with the respect due to someone who'd shaped their boss's character. This is Evelyn, he'd tell them. She taught me everything that matters about integrity and loyalty. Everything good about who I am started at her kitchen table. Last month, he'd surprised me by having that kitchen table shipped from the old farmhouse ruins. Somehow, his people had found it intact in the debris, barely damaged. Now it sat in my new kitchen, scarred and familiar, a bridge between my old life and my new one. The voicemail notification chimed. Against my better judgment, I played Rebecca's message. Mother, it's me again. I know you're probably tired of hearing from me, but I really need to talk to you. Things have gotten complicated, and her voice broke. I need your advice. Please call me back. I deleted the message without a second thought. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences, and Rebecca was still learning hers through mutual acquaintances. I'd heard about those consequences. Marcus had been passed over for a promotion at his firm after word spread about how he treated me. Apparently, his boss was a woman who didn't appreciate men who called their mothers in law vagrants. Their social standing in Ridgemont had plummeted once the story got out, and in a small town, stories like that always get out. More significantly, Marcus's business had started losing clients. Several of his wealthiest customers had mentioned they were uncomfortable working with someone who showed such disrespect to family. In their circle, reputation was everything, and Marcus's reputation was now toxic. The financial pressure was mounting. I'd heard they'd had to sell Marcus's Mercedes and were considering downsizing their house. The Persian carpet that was more important than his mother-in-law's welfare had been sold online 4 months ago, but Rebecca's real punishment wasn't financial. It was watching other people receive what she'd thrown away. Michael had started a foundation focused on supporting single mothers in rural communities, women who reminded him of me during those difficult years after David died. He'd invited me to serve on the board, and I discovered I had a talent for identifying which programs would make the most difference in women's lives. What happened at the foundation gala would show Rebecca exactly what she'd lost. Last week, the foundation had hosted a gala in San Francisco. Michael had flown me out for it, put me up in a penthouse suite, bought me a gown that cost more than I used to make in 3 months. I'd walked into that ballroom on his arm, introduced as my mother, Evelyn Morrison, to tech billionaires, politicians, and celebrities who'd actually heard of me through Michael's stories. The event raised $14 million for single mothers, $14 million that would provide childcare, education assistance, and emergency funds for women who were struggling the way I'd struggled. As I stood on that stage thanking the donors, I thought about the scared young mother I'd been 30 years ago, working myself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over our heads. That woman could never have imagined she'd someday be standing in a ballroom full of the most powerful people in the world, advocating for other women like herself. The local newspaper had run a photo of Michael and me at the gala. In it, we're both smiling, his arm around my shoulders, and I'm wearing a silver necklace he'd given me, a simple pendant that read, "World's Greatest Mom." I knew Rebecca had seen the photo because 4 days later, she'd driven to my house uninvited. "Mother, we need to talk," she'd said, standing on my front porch in a cheap dress I didn't recognize. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect hair. She looked tired, older, desperate. "We really don't," I'd replied calmly. "I've lost everything. Marcus filed for divorce last month. He blamed me for ruining his career, said marrying me was the worst decision he ever made." Tears had started flowing. "I'm living in a studio apartment above the dry cleaners. I'm working at Murphy's restaurant where you used to work." The same restaurant, Mother. I'd felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition. I knew what it was like to work at Murphy's, to come home exhausted and smelling like grease. But I'd done it out of love to support my child. Rebecca was doing it because her choices had finally caught up with her. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I'd said, and I meant it. "But your problems aren't mine to solve anymore." "But I'm your daughter." You're a 41-year-old woman who made her choices clearly and deliberately. You chose Marcus over me, money over family, appearances over love. Now you have to live with those choices. People make mistakes, Mother. Don't I deserve forgiveness? That's when I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the scared child she was pretending to be, but the calculating woman she'd become. Forgiveness isn't the same as rescue, I'd told her. I forgave you months ago, but forgiving you doesn't mean I'm going to save you from the consequences of your actions. She'd left after that, but not before I'd caught her taking photos of my house with her phone, probably planning to sell them to some gossip site or use them to convince people she still had access to Michael's wealth through me. But this morning's phone call would be different from all the others. This morning, as Michael arrived for our weekly breakfast, I told him about Rebecca's latest attempts to contact me. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek as he always did. "How's my favorite mother today? Perfect now that you're here." I poured him coffee. "Rebecca called 7 times this week." He settled into the chair beside me. "Did you answer?" "No." He nodded approvingly. "Good, you've given her enough chances. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh." "Miss Evelyn," he said, taking my hand in both of his, "you spent 30 years being too soft. You gave and gave until you had nothing left. Look where it got you, standing on her doorstep, begging for shelter after you'd lost everything." He was right, but it was still difficult to completely let go of the guilt. She's still my daughter, and I'm still your son. The difference is I chose to be. Every day I wake up grateful that you saved me. Rebecca wakes up resentful that you weren't perfect. His voice grew firm. You don't owe her anything more than what you've already given. Later that afternoon, as Michael worked on his laptop in the kitchen and I prepared dinner, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Rebecca. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Sarah Chen from Ridgemont Memorial Hospital. We have Rebecca Thompson here. She's asking for you. She's been in an accident, nothing life-threatening, but she's quite shaken up." My heart clenched despite everything. "I'll be right there." Michael drove me to the hospital. When we arrived, we found Rebecca in a private room with a bandaged arm and bruises on her face. She looked small and vulnerable in that hospital bed. When she saw me, tears started flowing immediately. "Mother, you came. Of course I came. You're hurt. I crashed my car. I was so tired from working double shifts, and I couldn't stay awake." She sobbed harder. "I have no insurance. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. I have nothing, Mother, nothing." I sat down beside her bed, and for the first time in months, I took her hand. "What do you want from me, Rebecca?" "I want my mother back." Her voice was raw, honest. "Not your money, not your connections to Michael, just you. I want another chance to be the daughter you deserved, not the daughter I became." I looked into her eyes, searching for manipulation, for calculation. But all I saw was exhaustion, regret, and something that might finally be genuine remorse. "Why should I believe you this time? Because I finally understand what I lost. It took losing everything else to see it." She squeezed my hand weakly. "You spent your whole life teaching me about love and loyalty, and I spent mine running away from those lessons. I was so afraid of being poor again that I became poor in the ways that actually matter. What I decided in that moment would determine our future forever. Michael stood in the doorway, watching us. I glanced at him, and he gave me a small nod, not telling me what to do, but reminding me that whatever I decided, he'd support me. Rebecca, I said slowly, I can't go back to being the mother who sacrifices everything while you take it for granted. That woman is gone. She had to die so I could become who I am now. I don't want that mother back, Rebecca said firmly. I want to know the woman you've become. I want to earn the right to be part of your new life, not drag you back into the old one. I studied her face for a long moment. Here's what I'm willing to offer. I'll pay your hospital bills, not because you're entitled to it, but because I'm capable of helping and I choose to. Thank you. I'm not finished. I'll also help you get back on your feet. A modest apartment, not a mansion. Help finding a better job, not a handout. But you have to do the work, Rebecca. You have to prove that you're willing to build a real relationship with me, one based on mutual respect, not need or obligation. She nodded vigorously. I will, I promise. And one more thing, you'll attend counseling, not because there's something wrong with you, but because we both need help learning how to be in each other's lives in a healthy way. Okay, yes, anything. I stood up. I'm not rescuing you, Rebecca. I'm giving you an opportunity to rescue yourself. What you do with it is up to you. 3 months later, Rebecca sat at my kitchen table, the scarred one from the old farmhouse, helping me prepare vegetables for the foundation's community dinner. She was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment, working as an office manager at a local nonprofit, and attending therapy twice a week. Our relationship was different now, smaller, more careful, but also more honest. She didn't call me every day, but when she did call, our conversations were real. She asked about my life, not what she could get from it. She shared her struggles without expecting me to solve them. Michael still visited every week, and slowly, carefully, he and Rebecca were building their own relationship, not as competitors for my affection, but as two people who both loved me in different ways. I'm proud of you, I told Rebecca as we worked side by side in the kitchen. She looked up, surprised. For what? For doing the hard work, for becoming someone I enjoy spending time with, not because you're my daughter, but because of who you're choosing to be. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm proud of you too, Mother, for teaching me that it's never too late to change, even when it costs you everything. That evening, as the three of us sat on my front porch watching the sunset, Michael on one side, Rebecca on the other, I realized that some stories don't end with perfect reconciliation or complete rejection. Some end with something messier and more beautiful. The honest work of building new relationships from the ruins of old ones. I'd lost a farm but found my worth. I'd lost a daughter who took me for granted, but gained a daughter who was learning to value me. And I'd discovered that the boy I'd saved had been saving me all along, teaching me that I was worth saving. What are you thinking about? Michael asked, noticing my smile. I'm thinking that some families are born, some are built, and the best ones are both. I'm thinking that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Rebecca reached over and squeezed my hand. So am I. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed that everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, but real, and real was so much better than perfect had ever been. Thank you for staying with the story until the end. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Have you experienced the pain of choosing yourself after years of putting others first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters too.